April 1945. The European war was ending, but peace hadn't reached this small German town. The streets were rubble, the air thick with smoke and silence. Children wandered barefoot through the ruins, eyes sunken, clutching nothing but hunger. When the American convoy rolled in, the soldiers expected hostility or fear. Instead, they saw faces too tired to hate. Tiny figures watching from doorways, too weak to run, too proud to beg. Private Jack Williams climbed down from his truck. He had no orders for what to do next. Only a small chocolate bar in his pocket. A Hershey ration wrapped in foil. He tore it open, broke it in half, and knelt before a little girl standing near the road. She didn't move, not until her brother gave her a small nod. Then she stepped forward, trembling, and took the chocolate. A moment later she broke it again and handed a piece to him. No one spoke. Then someone laughed, a quiet, unsteady sound. Another soldier reached into his pocket, then another. Soon the convoy became a line of men, passing chocolate, gum, and biscuits into small hands. It was only candy, but in that moment it tasted like peace. If you want more true forgotten stories from World War II, hit the like button. Subscribe and join us for the next chapter of history. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. The next morning, the soldiers returned to the town square. The air was cold, but the sun cut through the smoke, casting long shadows across the broken cobblestones. The children were already there, huddled in small groups, waiting. Corporal Henry Adams carried a small box of rations. He opened it slowly, revealing bars of chocolate, tins of cookies, and small packs of candy. The children's eyes widened, some gasped, some reached out instinctively, unsure if this was real. Adams knelt down and held out a piece of chocolate. A boy, no older than 7, stepped forward. He sniffed the chocolate, then carefully took it, holding it to his chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. He looked up at Adams, and for the first time in days, a small smile broke across his face. Other soldiers joined in, forming a circle of kindness amidst the rubble. Chocolate bars were shared, pieces broken into smaller pieces, smiles exchanged with shy nods and quiet laughter. No words were necessary. Each act of sharing was a bridge over years of fear and loss. By noon, the square was alive. Children played tag over broken stones, soldiers laughed with them, handing out sweets, watching them run with joy they hadn't felt in months. A simple bar of chocolate had transformed the war-torn streets into a place of connection, of fleeting peace. It was more than candy. It was a message. Even in the darkest times, humanity could survive, even thrive, in the smallest acts of kindness. By late afternoon, the soldiers had finished distributing the chocolate, but the effect lingered. Children clutched the wrappers, examining them like treasures. Some traded pieces, learning generosity and sharing in the simplest, purest form. Lieutenant Samuel Price stood to the side, watching quietly. He noticed a girl no more than 9, sitting alone on a broken step, staring at an empty tin. Without a word, he knelt beside her and handed over the last remaining chocolate bar. Her eyes widened, and she hugged the bar to her chest, tears forming, but not of sadness, of relief and wonder. The soldiers began cleaning up the square, moving rubble aside, patching fences, sweeping dirt. Their presence was gentle, careful, as if aware that the smallest gesture could make a lasting impact. The children mimicked them, brushing cobblestones and clearing debris, learning from these strangers that even in war, care mattered. As dusk approached, a quiet stillness settled over the town. The soldiers lined up, preparing to leave, but the children ran to them, clutching the chocolate, waving, calling their names. In those moments, no one spoke of enemies or battles. They were simply people, sharing a fleeting moment of humanity amid the chaos. Lieutenant Price looked back at the children one last time. He saw hope, fragile but present, taking root where fear had dominated. A single act of kindness, a small bar of chocolate, had shifted something inside them all. And for the soldiers, it was a reminder that even in war, they could choose to fight for more than just survival. They could fight for humanity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the shattered rooftops, the children returned to their homes, chocolate in hand. Their families gathered around, eyes wide, mouths smiling, faces softened by the unexpected gift. Whispers of gratitude passed through the streets, carried on the cool evening breeze. Inside a small, dimly lit house, a boy sat at the kitchen table, unwrapping his chocolate carefully. His mother watched silently, a mix of relief and disbelief on her face. For the first time in months, the tension in her shoulders eased. She placed her hand on her son's head, silently thanking the strangers who had shown kindness when hope seemed lost. Across the town, other children shared their bars with younger siblings, dividing pieces carefully, learning that even a small gift could be multiplied by generosity. Neighbors peeked from broken windows, nodding at the soldiers who had brought this brief reprieve. It was a quiet revolution of human connection, a momentary truce from fear and hunger. The American soldiers, miles away now, thought of the smiles they had witnessed. Letters would be written home that night, describing not battles or casualties, but small acts of humanity, and how it changed the lives of children who had known only hardship. Some would be kept, tucked into journals, to remember that war did not erase the possibility of compassion. In the cold darkness, the soldiers understood something profound, that a single act, a single choice, could ripple far beyond the moment, touching lives in ways no gun or strategy ever could. And in that lesson, the children and the soldiers shared something enduring, the quiet, unspoken knowledge that even in war, humanity could survive. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day lingered in the town. Children ran through the streets, laughter replacing the cautious whispers that had filled the air before. Neighbors exchanged small gifts, eggs, bread, scraps of cloth, paying forward the kindness they had received from strangers. In the makeshift schoolhouse, lessons resumed, though the teachers noticed a subtle change. Children who had once been withdrawn now raised their hands, spoke freely, and shared stories of chocolate bars and smiling soldiers. It was more than sugar. It was a symbol, a bridge to hope, and a reminder that the world beyond the war still contained kindness. Some soldiers would return months later, visiting the same town, bringing supplies or letters, but they found that the true gift had already taken root. Children ran to meet them, calling names, remembering faces, recounting tales of chocolate and trust. The soldiers realized that their brief stop, their small act, had grown into something far larger than they could have imagined. In homes where despair had once ruled, warmth and laughter had returned. Parents spoke quietly of the day. Soldiers handed out chocolate, and how it had reminded them that even in devastation, humanity endured. For the children, it became a story told and retold, a legend not of war, but of a moment when the world seemed to pause if only for a heartbeat. History would remember battles and strategies, victories and losses, but for that town, that day was remembered differently. It was remembered as a day when the simple sweetness of chocolate became a lifeline, a spark of hope in a dark world. Years later, the children who had once held chocolate bars in trembling hands grew into adults. Some became teachers, some doctors, some craftsmen, each carrying with them the memory of that small act of kindness. And though the war had scarred their lives in countless ways, that day remained untouched, a moment of clarity and connection. Families told the story to their own children, emphasizing the soldiers who saw them not as enemies, but as human beings in need. The tale of chocolate became a symbol, a lesson that even amid destruction, compassion could bloom. It was a memory that refused to fade, living in kitchens, classrooms, and hearts alike. Some of the soldiers, long retired, received letters from that town years later. Handwritten notes, folded carefully, describing lives that had been touched, opportunities that had arisen, and gratitude that never diminished. They were reminded that even the smallest act, a single chocolate bar offered to a starving child, could ripple through time, changing lives in ways they could never fully measure. In history books, their deeds might be footnotes, but in the hearts of those children, now grown, those soldiers were heroes of a different kind, not for battles won, but for humanity shown. Decades later, a small reunion took place in the very town where it all began. A few of the surviving American soldiers returned, grey-haired, some with walking sticks, others with hands worn from years of work, but all carrying the same gentle smiles. The children they had fed now stood before them as adults, some with families of their own, eyes bright with recognition and gratitude. They shook hands, embraced, and shared stories of lives rebuilt, of wounds healed, and of hope restored. The town square, once scarred by war and scarcity, now echoed with laughter and conversation, a living testament to the enduring power of kindness. Photographs were taken, hands clasped across generations, the chocolate bar a distant but indelible symbol of a moment that transcended the horrors around it. Local historians later recounted the story in museums and schools, teaching students that bravery comes not only in battle, but also in empathy. Children listening to these stories learned that one act of generosity could alter destinies, inspire gratitude, and foster peace long after the guns had fallen silent. And in quiet homes, long after the reunion ended, letters, photographs, and memories were preserved. Reminders that even amid the darkest times, human connection, small and deliberate, could light a path forward. One chocolate bar, one gesture, one day, had changed countless lives forever. The story of that day became a quiet legend among veterans' circles and European towns alike. American soldiers recounted it during reunions, emphasizing that it wasn't medals or victories that mattered, but small choices that reflected humanity. Some of the German children, now adults, became doctors, teachers, and community leaders, often crediting that single act of kindness with instilling in them a sense of hope and purpose. Across continents, letters exchanged between soldiers and the children's families documented friendships that endured for decades. Names were remembered, birthdays celebrated, and holidays shared, a network of gratitude linking strangers forever. In classrooms, students learned that heroism wasn't confined to the battlefield. Sometimes it was found in sharing, in empathy, in seeing others as human beings first. Historians later studied the incident as an example of post-war reconciliation, illustrating how compassion could break cycles of hatred. It reminded people that even in the aftermath of war, decisions driven by empathy could ripple outward, transforming lives in ways far beyond the immediate moment. And so the memory of that day endured, not as a military maneuver, but as a moral lesson. That a simple chocolate bar, shared without expectation, could become a symbol of hope, humanity, and the enduring potential for goodness amidst devastation. Decades later, the town erected a small monument near the square where the soldiers had distributed the chocolate. Engraved were the words, "In the smallest acts, greatness is found." Tourists, students, and locals paused there, reflecting on the power of empathy in a world often scarred by conflict. Veterans who returned to the site would often leave a bar of chocolate, a note, or a simple flower. It was their way of honoring the memory, not of war, but of connection. One elderly man, once a corporal in that unit, whispered each time he visited, "We didn't just hand out candy, we handed out hope." The children who had tasted that chocolate as boys grew into men and women who passed the story to their own children. They told them that, amidst despair, small acts of kindness could illuminate entire lifetimes. And so the legend endured, crossing generations, proving that even the darkest days could be softened by a single gesture of humanity. In classrooms across Germany, teachers would recount the story during history lessons. They showed faded photographs of American soldiers kneeling in mud, handing chocolate to ragged children whose smiles were fragile but genuine. Students learned not only about battles and strategies, but about courage of a different kind, the courage to care. Letters from former children to surviving veterans began arriving years later, written in careful script or typed on aging typewriters. "Thank you for the chocolate," one letter read simply. "But thank you more for showing us that even in war, kindness exists." These letters would sometimes be pinned on bulletin boards in veteran halls, reminders that their actions had left a permanent mark far beyond the battlefield. The soldiers themselves never expected recognition. They had acted on instinct, on empathy, not for medals or praise. Yet the ripples of that day reached farther than any military campaign, reminding the world that humanity could persist even amidst destruction. Decades later, historians would study the event as more than a footnote in war. They analyzed diaries, letters, and photographs, noting how a simple act of sharing food altered perceptions on both sides. It became a symbol of reconciliation, of how empathy could bridge the deepest divides, even in the aftermath of violence. Communities in the German town eventually honored the soldiers with small memorials, plaques in schoolyards, trees planted in their memory. Parents told their children the story each year, teaching them that the choices of a few could change the lives of many. The act of sharing chocolate became more than generosity. It became a lesson in humanity, endurance, and hope. For the American soldiers, the memory of that day lingered long after the guns fell silent. They had witnessed destruction and despair across the towns of Germany, streets littered with rubble, homes reduced to splinters, and faces marked by hunger and fear. Yet among the ruins there were children, small, fragile figures, eyes wide, cheeks hollowed, some too weak to even cry. The soldiers carried chocolate bars in their pockets, remnants of care packages from home, intended as a small comfort for themselves. In that moment, a silent decision was made. Without orders, without protocol, they handed out the chocolate, one small piece at a time, to trembling hands. The first exchanges were tentative. Children stared, unsure whether this stranger was friend or foe, whether the sweet treat was real or another trick of fate. Then, slowly, smiles began to break across their faces. Tiny hands clutched the chocolate, some offering shy thank yous in broken English, some in gestures only the heart could understand. Soldiers knelt, sharing stories, laughter, and the briefest moments of normalcy in a world turned upside down. In that exchange, walls fell. The barriers of nationality, language, and war dissolved for an instant. Years later, letters arrived from Germany. Children, now grown, wrote of that day, recounting the kindness of strangers who offered chocolate in a time of famine, who treated them not as enemies, but as children deserving care. For the soldiers, it was a lesson learned in the midst of devastation. Even small acts of humanity could heal wounds left by war, could bridge divides thought insurmountable, and could leave a mark on lives long after the last shot was fired. And in that fleeting, fragile connection, they found hope, that even in the darkest moments, light could pass from hand to hand, chocolate to child, soldier to stranger, forever altering the course of memory, compassion, and history. The townspeople watched from doorways and shattered windows as the soldiers continued their quiet mission. Women, men, and the elderly emerged cautiously, unsure what to make of these uniformed strangers moving gently among the ruins. Some held babies in tattered blankets, their eyes following every step, every gesture, every smile offered by the Americans. For a moment the war seemed suspended, a fragile bubble where fear was replaced by trust, if only for an hour. Soldiers distributed more chocolate, sometimes breaking the bars into halves and quarters to ensure everyone received a portion. A boy, no older than 7, timidly approached a sergeant, holding out his tiny hands. The sergeant knelt, their eyes meeting, and offered the smallest piece he could spare. The child's face lit up, a toothless grin spreading across his cheeks, and for a brief instant the horrors of bombed-out streets and empty pantries vanished. Nearby, an older girl shared her meager bread with a younger sibling, the soldiers smiling quietly, understanding the unspoken bonds that hunger forged. A simple act, a hand extended, chocolate shared, bridged the divide created by years of conflict, creating a memory that would outlast the war itself. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the ruins, the soldiers knew they could not stay forever. But they left behind more than empty wrappers. They left hope. A fleeting, yet enduring reminder that even amidst destruction, humanity could endure, carried forward in small, unassuming moments of kindness and the simple sweetness of chocolate shared on a winter's day. By mid-afternoon, the village square was filled with German children, faces streaked with dirt and hunger. American soldiers knelt, handing out bars of chocolate. Each bar became more than a sweet. It was a symbol of kindness in a broken world. Private James McAllister watched a small boy clutch a piece of chocolate like treasure. The boy's dark, wary eyes softened, and a small smile appeared. Around them, other soldiers distributed cans of food, blankets, and scarves. It wasn't much, but for the children, it meant everything. Soldiers spoke to children in broken German. Children laughed, pointed at each other, and shared chocolate among themselves. The air, once heavy with smoke, now carried laughter. Mothers appeared at windows, watching cautiously. Some joined the square, bringing small gifts or helping their children take chocolate. Villagers and soldiers communicated through gestures, smiles, and nods. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, long shadows stretched across the cobblestones. McAllister realized that no medal could capture the day's significance. Chocolate and small acts of care had brought hope to starving children. For that day, fear and hunger were replaced by trust and laughter. By evening, children ran back to their homes with chocolate clutched tightly. Soldiers packed up, knowing they had changed lives without firing a single shot. Simple kindness had created bonds, even in the middle of war. And in that village square, a small piece of chocolate became a moment that would not be forgotten. Night fell over the village, quiet except for the occasional murmur of children recounting the day. Inside makeshift shelters, soldiers cleaned up chocolate wrappers and distributed extra blankets. Exhaustion tugged at their bodies, but there was a lightness in their hearts. McAllister sat on a wooden crate, staring at a half-eaten chocolate bar. He thought of the boy who had smiled so freely, the mother who had waved quietly, the children who had shared without fear. This was a victory of a different kind. A German woman approached him, her hands trembling as she held a small bundle of bread. She didn't speak English, he didn't speak German, but the gesture was clear. Gratitude passed without words. The village dogs wandered among the soldiers, sniffing chocolate and scraps. A child's laughter echoed from the nearby alley, breaking the cold night air. In that moment, the war outside seemed distant, almost unreal. By the flickering lamplight, soldiers wrote letters home, describing the faces they had seen, the smiles they had inspired. They knew that these simple acts, sharing chocolate, showing care, would ripple through the lives of these children forever. McAllister placed his chocolate bar on the crate, savoring the silence. A day that began with fear ended with hope. In the heart of wartime Germany, amidst rubble and ration lines, a single bar of chocolate had become a bridge between enemies, a symbol that humanity could survive even in war. Dawn broke over the village, pale light spilling across shattered rooftops. Children stirred, their eyes bright with anticipation, remembering the soldiers and chocolate from the day before. A few ran toward the main square, clinging to small gifts, homemade trinkets, anything to show thanks. McAllister and his squad moved among them, offering smiles and gentle nods. Even the youngest ones seemed to understand that these soldiers had not just brought candy, they had brought kindness. A boy handed McAllister a small wooden toy, roughly carved but polished with care. He knelt to meet the child's eyes, nodding solemnly, placing the toy in his coat pocket. The gesture needed no translation. It was mutual recognition, respect born from shared humanity. Soldiers laughed quietly, trading stories and chocolate with children and parents alike. Neighbors came out from hiding, curious, cautious, yet drawn by the sense of safety. The village, once silent and tense, hummed softly with life again. McAllister observed a group of children breaking bread together, sharing in a way he had never seen in combat zones. He realized that the smallest actions, a bar of chocolate, a smile, a nod of encouragement, could plant seeds of hope that war could not erase. By midday, the soldiers packed their supplies to move on, leaving behind warmth and laughter. The children waved, some crying, some smiling, the memory of kindness etched into their young minds. A day of chocolate, a day of humanity, a day that reminded everyone that even amidst war, compassion could survive. As the soldiers marched out of the village, the morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows on the cobblestone streets. The children ran alongside them, waving and shouting their thanks, voices ringing against the distant ruins. Parents followed at a careful distance, cautious but relieved, witnessing a rare moment of connection. McAllister glanced back, seeing the tiny hands reaching out, the wide eyes filled with trust and hope. He felt a weight lift, not of victory or strategy, but of simple humanity. The squad continued along the dirt road leading out of town, chocolate wrappers fluttering from pockets, a small sign of yesterday's joy. Conversations were quiet, punctuated by laughter as soldiers recalled moments from the morning. The girl who shared her bread, the boy who gave a carved toy. It was not medals or commendations they remembered, but faces, voices, gratitude. Farther down the road, smoke from distant fires reminded them of the war they had left behind, yet the memory of the village stayed with them. Each soldier carried a piece of it, etched into memory like a photograph, tangible yet fleeting. Even as the landscape changed, McAllister knew something had shifted in those children. They had seen that soldiers could be kind, that amidst destruction, small gestures could persist. The village might rebuild slowly, but hope had been delivered in chocolate and smiles. By evening, the squad set camp beneath a cluster of trees. McAllister took out the small wooden toy, inspecting it, then placed it beside his helmet. A reminder that war did not define them, but the choices they made, the kindness they carried, and the lives they touched, even briefly, did. Night fell over the village, the sky painted in deep indigo, stars faint against the smoke of distant battles. Inside the empty schoolhouse, soldiers stacked their gear and huddled around dim lanterns, weary but quiet. The air smelled of wood smoke, dust, and faint chocolate, remnants of the morning's shared rations. Outside, the children had gathered near the edges of town, peeking cautiously through broken fences and shattered walls. Some held small tokens, pieces of bread, a carved toy, offering them silently to the soldiers they now trusted. Even in darkness, their eyes glimmered with hope and curiosity, unbroken by months of hunger. McAllister walked to the doorway, watching the scene, listening to the soft footsteps and hushed whispers. He realized that this was the first time many of these children had smiled without fear in months, perhaps years. The soldiers, exhausted and tense, allowed themselves small smiles, shared nods, brief laughter. One boy approached, stepping onto the creaking floorboards, hands outstretched, offering a handmade bracelet. McAllister accepted it, nodding with quiet gratitude. In that moment, the walls of the ruined schoolhouse, the lingering scent of war, all faded. What remained was a fragile, human connection, a silent pact between soldier and child, a pact that despite conflict, kindness could endure.